From the creators who brought you RuPaul's Drag Race and $1 Million Listing, this is World of Wonder's Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of the Wow Report, where we count down the top 10 topics of the week that make us go wow. I'm co-founder of World of Wonder, Fenton Bailey, joined by a club kid turned best-selling author and wow-lebrity, James St. James.
I'm feeling a little green today. I don't have my ring light. I'm very upset.
Looking gorgeous.
Thank you.
Looking gorgeous. And of course, World of Wonder's Chief Creative Officer, Tom Campbell.
Hello, I'm enjoying the natural light pouring into the second floor conference room here at World of Wonder.
It is a gorgeous glow. And we're all back together, virtually anyway. And this week, a very special edition, scandals. And not just any scandal, but like Hollywood scandals. Because what is really better at the end of the day than a Hollywood scandal? So here's our countdown of the top 10 Hollywood scandals that made us go, wow.
Wait a minute, I don't remember. Hold on with the because mine aren't really Hollywood scandals. Mine are true crime.
There was an
scandals.
email exchange where it was decided that they were Hollywood related. I thought.
I thought we were just doing the biggest scandals of all time.
I thought you said that movies had been made about all of them.
I guess I can tie it in. I suppose.
Don't have
Cut all this out. Whatever.
Nope, it's staying in.
Best part of the show.
Start number 10. Tom.
Number 10.
You can't talk about Hollywood scandals without talking about the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. I fear I get too gleeful when I talk about this. And it was a horrible tragedy, but it sucked us in. It just changed culture. I was working at ABC Daytime at the time, and soaps, this is 94, and soaps were happening still, and people were watching. And then, but they would preempt the programming to cover the trial. And then at night, those of us who worked and couldn't watch TV all day, there was shows sparking up. E! Network got on the map because they had, I think it was Kathleen Sullivan did a recap every night, a breathless recap of what happened. And it was the harbinger for reality television in many ways. I know there were other things that preceded it, but it was like this idea that always the truth is stranger than fiction. And it had all the elements again and I didn't know anyone, because oftentimes on the East Coast people are kind of like, oh, you LA people, you're so shallow. I think the world was fascinated because OJ was so beautiful.
It was also the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle that is something that is still with us today. It's one of the legacies of the OJ Simpson. Court TV is something that sprang out of it as well. There was a whole industry that revolved itself around this murder.
And even before the trial, obviously the news was unbelievable. Talk about at that time a public perception, OJ being the perfect athlete, perfect American, most handsome man alive, and representing the Black community in such a positive way, perceptually, and then for this, accusation and crime to happen.
But I also think, though, that when you look at some of the problems that we still have today with the race relations between, African Americans and white people, it does come down still to this murder where the Black community sided with OJ Simpson and the white community sided against him. And that is one of the big divisions that started happening in our country about 30 years ago.
Yes. And it was right after a few years after the Rodney King trial, which led to riots. First of all, two things. Do you remember where you were during the OJ White Broncos slow speed chase?
Well, that to me is the sort of ground zero of, one respect of reality TV. That freeway chase covered live for hours on TV, and the whole idea of Big Brother, in which kind of nothing happens, is because the freeway chase was.
But underneath it was the most horrible thing could have happened. Like, were we about to witness a suicide? It was basically What
Well, I
happened?
remember I was at the tunnel at the time, and it was a night at the tunnel, and the entire club stopped. They turned the music off. They brought a television out from the office, and the entire club gathered around this little tiny black and white, and we all just sat and watched it at like 2:00 in the morning. It was insane.
And that happened around the world. I was working at MTV on Dead at 21. We were in production. We were doing some like dream sequences in a studio. We were like not on location, and the world stopped and we watched. And we just wanted to know what was going on. Where were you, Fenton? Do you recall?
I was actually on vacation visiting my parents in the middle of France, and Randy calls me and says, you've got to check out what's going on. And as a result of it, actually, we made this documentary for the BBC called OJ, I think it was called OJ Media Mayhem and Madness. And it was all about the media coverage of the whole thing, and triggered by this, not so much, funnily enough, the murder itself, but the freeway chase in particular. And then just a sort of, my favorite clip was a news clip. Patrick Healy, local news station, got ice cream from the store that Nicole Brown and Goldman went to before they went home to Nicole's place where Ron Goldman was attacked, right?
And that's part of what made me think of this. My brother and my nephew were in town, and I was driving around, and I was driving down San Vicente, and all these almost 30 years later, I remember it was like Disneyland, like the Casa Luna restaurant, all the places, Nicole's house, like this, how Brentwood became this kind of frightening, sad monopoly board for the world in terms of like who did it and how done it. Anyway.
But bought ice cream. So the news anchor bought ice cream and brought it from the store to the house to see how much it melted. I'm trying to remember what possible consequence could the ice cream, like, did Ron Goldman come over with ice cream?
She left her sunglasses at the restaurant, and he brought them to her. And the theory is that whoever came to get Nicole saw him. He approached the door, and he was also a second victim. There's a whole theory, which I won't get into, about how there's this other guy that probably helped OJ, but that's another story altogether.
Right. Gosh, we could do a whole episode on OJ Simpson scandal.
It's the 30th anniversary of the death coming up next year.
If I never hear about OJ, I mean, literally, this was the last time in my life I really need to trot out the OJ story again. Well, it's really been done a little too much.
Well, it's because you're old. Young people want to know from us elders what it was like, Grandpa. What was it like? What was it like to be in Los Angeles during the OJ trial, Grandpa?
There you go. And now, number 9, James.
Number 9.
We'll talk about stories that the young'uns don't know about. I'm going to trot out a story about Evelyn Nesbit and the murder of Stanford White. Evelyn Nesbit was the first it girl, okay? She was the first New York City it girl at the turn of the last century. She's 16 years old. She's a model, okay? And when I say that she is everywhere, she is in newspaper ads. She is in dirty French postcards. She is in fashion magazines. She's on the cover of Harper's Bazaar, Vanity Fair. She is portrait artists are painting her. Sculptors are sculpting her. She is on billboards. She is the face of Ozma of Oz. L. Frank Baum used her image for the Oz books. Literally, you cannot turn a magazine. You cannot look anywhere without finding Evelyn Nesbit. She also, from age 14 on, has a series of sugar daddies, rich and powerful men who are taking care of her. And one of these men who rapes her, essentially when she's 14 years old, is the world famous architect Stanford White, who designed the Washington Monument in Washington Square Park. He designs mansions all up and down Fifth Avenue. He designs everywhere in New York City. There's Stanford White. Well, he has a swing, a red velvet swing from the ceiling of his bedroom, and he lies under the swing, and she swings back and forth, and he masturbates as he looks up her skirts. And that's there's a very famous movie, The Girl on the Red Velvet Swing, in which Joan Collins, a young Joan Collins, plays Evelyn Nesbit. So that's later on down the line. Well, Evelyn Nesbit goes on to marry a millionaire named Henry Thaw Jr., who is just batshit crazy, just insane, jealous, violent. He's particularly jealous of Stanford White and the relationship that they had. So one night, they're at a nightclub on the roof of the Madison Square Garden. They're taking in a show. Stanford White walks in. Henry Thaw pulls out a gun, shoots him point blank in the face. Bang, 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 kills him. Chaos erupts, and it becomes the scandal of the century. Okay, it is, when I say that it is the trial of the century, before OJ Simpson, before Gloria Vanderbilt, William Randolph Hearst takes this story and splashes it on the front page of every newspaper for months and months and months and months. Eventually, he's guilty by version of insanity. She goes off and joins like the burlesque circuit. She opens a speakeasy. She ends up doing some silent movies in the 1920s in Hollywood. And she writes a couple books about this. Like I said, there's a very famous movie, The Girl on the Red Velvet Swing with Joan Collins. Fantastic. Also, one of the best movies about her is Ragtime, 1980, in which young Elizabeth McGovern, who later goes on to be Lady Crowley on Downton Abbey, the mother on Downton Abbey, plays her, and she's absolutely spectacular. She is so good. Norman Mailer plays Stanford White, which is very bizarre casting. But if you want to know about Evelyn Nesbit, and you should because she's absolutely fabulous, just Google her. Her beauty is jaw-dropping. Her beauty is so modern that she could be the 20s, the 60s, the 80s, 2020s. I mean, she just has a face that you will never forget. And these movies are spectacular. So that's my Hollywood scandal.
And James St. James was there.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
What year was this?
It was like it was 1906, I believe, is when the murder happened. And so at the turn of the century is when she's at her absolute peak. She was a Gibson girl as well in the 1890s, I believe.
Right. All right, well, moving on to number 8.
Number 8.
Sunset and Divine. Well, I was initially racking my brains for scandals because I'm not a very scandal-oriented person.
It's all World of Wonder does.
All I could think of was Hugh Grant and the whole Divine Brown debacle. June the 27th, 1995, so that's what, 28 years ago. He was in a car parked on Sunset Boulevard. I was going to say caught red-handed. That's not quite the way to put it. But in a car with being orally serviced by Divine Brown, a sex worker. And it was kind of a curious story. I mean, in some respects, I guess, people having sex with sex workers in Hollywood is not a particularly remarkable thing. I suppose it blew up because it was Hugh Grant, right?
Duh. Who was dating Elizabeth Hurley at the time. The most beautiful woman on earth from then to this day.
First of all, why would you cheat on Elizabeth Hurley? But second of all, he was known for being a proper, very good boy, a sweet boy who always did these wonderful period pieces. And it was the last person on earth you would think would do this.
One of Fenton's college chums, even.
Yes, we were at uni together, and yes, but this is not about that. And I think that,
this is not about me.
For once.
And you're right, James. He had a sort of peaches and cream, sort of porcelain complexion, incredibly handsome, and was sort of in all the sort of Merchant Ivory, Jane Austen, the quintessence of picture postcard Britishness, right? That was, and I suppose in some respects, the interesting thing about this scandal is that at the time, of course, he apologized. I believe he said it was a very goatish thing to do, which was an interesting. He went on the late night talk show and said that.
There was the very famous Jay Leno interaction.
There you go. That's
Leno
right.
said,
What were you thinking?
But also yes, right. What was he thinking? And in some respects, I mean, he recently addressed this in 2023 on The View and said that, that on the one hand, the sort of net effect of it wasn't so bad because they think perhaps it killed off that, in the same way that Paul Rubens, rest his soul, was apprehended in adult theater, and that kind of didn't kill off the Pee Wee Herman thing, but freed him perhaps from the straitjacket of that role. Perhaps this incident freed Hugh Grant from the from the sort of two-dimensional.
Everybody has a kink. The fact that he got caught is what the whole scandal is, because the idea you're out of town, you're away from your girlfriend, there's whatever. It's the oldest. He's old school, and it's the oldest profession alive. But it's crazy that it's illegal to me anyway.
Yeah, well, exactly. I memean, there was some sort of fun-entertainment to be had from it, because I think there was a sort of a movie version made of the whole encounter, which did anyone see that? I think it was called Sunset and Divine.
Did it star Divine Brown?
I believe it did.
Divine.
Real name Estella Marie Thompson, and according to Wikipedia, she made 1.6 million from publicity related to the case. Bought herself a 4-bedroom house in Beverly Hills, put her kids through private school. So she said, it all worked out for the better.
Power to the people.
Although she got fined, as did he, but she had to do jail time, and he just got probation.
Story of sexist.
Well, right, exactly.
Well, well, I don't know why you would jail the Johns. I never even understand any of it. I like why people are. I mean, it's just sex, and if you want to give someone money for sex, people are buying houses for your girlfriends, and
Well, how did they
find me now?
How did they
think
even
it was
get
like?
caught?
I feel like they were not that deep. They weren't in like a horrible neighborhood. They were like between Fairfax and La Brea. I have a feeling they
were
weren't
just on the side of the road, and she was just sucking him off in the car.
I think they were at that Yukon. I think they were at that Yukon mining company.
Oh, maybe. Well, but that was all trans workers there.
Santa Monica.
Well, but also, I mean, it could be all sex workers. Is there a monopoly?
Well, no, but I mean, I remember the Yukon Mining Company very well, and it was nothing but that was where Eddie Murphy picked up, his trans
maybe
girl.
That's what I'm thinking of and getting them.
I just heard "Party All the Time" on the radio coming to work today, and Eddie Murphy's "Party," which is a great song. It's Rick James. Party all the time, and I thought like that was people used to lord that over Eddie Murphy. I guess because he was a homophobe in his comedy. I thought, like, what's the big deal if Eddie liked trans?
Well, the problem with that was, I can't really say this without getting into some.
No, but his public. I remember his stand-up was very. It was,
but I know some of the trans girls who were with him, and their stories are pretty.
I see. But even so, that story didn't kind of catch fire, as it were, quite the way Sunset and Divine, the Hugh Grant one did.
Right. Eddie was a rumor. Hugh Grant was a mugshot. It's the difference.
Right. I guess that's right. But it seems to have hurt neither of them, and they both lived, if not happily ever after, successfully ever after in each respect. All right, I'm just babbling. Let's take a quick break. Blake, do you have a question for us?
Wait, I have to interrupt. Before, just for the people who are listening and not watching, Blake is in a rural setting. I believe, if I'm spilling the secret, sorry, I believe he's on the set of Cocaine Bear 2.
Yes.
But anyway, you look very woodsy. I like it.
And just a little side note, I sing my dog likes to potty all the time whenever I take him outside. I do have a question. What was Hollywood's first scandal? At least if you Google Hollywood's first scandal, this is what pops up everywhere. And a hint, we've actually talked about this on the show before.
All right. Going to take a quick break. I'm going to Google the answer, and we'll be right back after the break here on the Wow Report on Radio Andy.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report on Radio Andy. We're doing a very special edition of the Wow Report. We normally just count down the top 10 things of the week that made us go wow. But this week, we're counting down the top 10 Hollywood-ish scandals that made us go wow.
Wow.
Blake?
Yeah, and I asked, what was the first Hollywood scandal? At least if you Google first Hollywood scandal, this is what comes up.
Well, I would have to say it would have to be the Fatty Arbuckle.
I'm voting Fatty Arbuckle.
That's right. James, what happened to Fatty Arbuckle?
Well, he was at a party in San Francisco, and he went into a room with a woman. What was her name?
Virginia
And-
Rapp.
Virginia Rapp, yes. And what the scandal said was that he fucked her with a Coke bottle, and she died from sepsis after that. She actually had a botched abortion, and that didn't come out for like 50 years. That's what really happened. But he lost his career. He was the biggest star on the planet next to Charlie Chaplin, and he lost everything in the ensuing trial. And
was it a Coke bottle or a champagne bottle?
It goes back and forth.
Legend is the Coca-Cola bottle.
Yeah. Virginia is laid to rest at Hollywood Forever. Blake and I have gone to visit her and taken our picture next to her grave many times. I always go and pay tribute to her.
And what happened to Fatty Arbuckle? I mean, he lost his career, but did he?
He ended up, the Hollywood community sort of rallied around him, and he ended up writing under assumed names, I believe, and directing under assumed names. And he sort of got his career back, but he was never as famous as he was as Fatty Arbuckle.
He used the fake name Skinny Moose Knuckle, which was interesting.
You're joking.
Yes.
I'm credible.
It's fun to watch Fenton, see if it makes sense or not. Just like, wait,
slowly, you can see the gears turning. I am very excited about this next scandal. We've reached number 7, Tom.
Number 7.
I saw the list, James, and I know you had very obscure, intricate James St. James dusty book stories, and mine are like, from the sort of like BuzzFeed list, But these things had
for those of you listening, James is now giving the finger to Tom. 2 fingers.
Oh, you can feel it. You don't even need
Dusty book scandal. Oh, wait till you hear my next one. I'm really going deep.
But mine are from this century. Anyway, so but it's the Robert Blake murder of Bonny Lee Bakley at Vito's in Studio City. That's like it's Hollywood, so everybody thinks like they know Robert Blake. He played a murderer in Cold Blood. He was one of the best actors and most difficult actors. Kind of crazy. Was in Beretta in the 70s, which was one of those shows that was kind of really good. And he was kind of what?
The Little Rascals.
He went back as far as the Little Rascals. He was a child star. He was a
child star who worked with W.C. Fields. Who can say they worked with W.C. Fields in Mae West? He might have considered a Fatty Arbuckle thing, but then pulled away. Bonny Lee Bakley had been married. Her Robert Blake marriage, which eventually happened, was her 10th. Oh,
oh yeah, and she had been dating Marlon Brando's son.
Oh yes, Christian.
Yes, Christian Brando. And when she had, I guess she'd been dating the Brando and also dating Robert Blake or sleeping with them. And when she became pregnant and had the baby, she said it was Brando's. But in fact, after a DNA test, it was Robert Blake's. And so it was 99 into 2000. He marries her. 5 months later, they're having dinner at Vito's, which has been torn down and rebuilt and is now where the Michael Feinstein is. It's still in the same place, but it used to be this great divey red booth, frescoes of Italy on the wall. And it was just a great place to go before, and then even more exciting afterwards. But he parked. He didn't use the valet. He parked on a side street. It's very residential there, very safe, you would think. He left her there because he forgot his gun in the booth. A gun he carried for his own self-protection. He goes back, gets the gun, although no witnesses ever saw him come back and get the gun. He went back to the car, and oh my gosh, she had been shot in the head. They eventually found some gun residue, which he had lots of excuses. He went to trial. 2 men came forward and said that they were approached about being hired by Robert Blake to kill his wife, but somehow he escaped the criminal trial. Like he was acquitted. He was let go. Once again, fame seemed to trump, the whole thing, and there wasn't enough proof. He was, because I've read about that. It's like, did he spend time in jail? He was found guilty for the civil suit of wrongful death, paid lots of money, and his career was effectively over. He died last year. We talked about it a little bit, but it's another one of those things where it suddenly turns a neighborhood into kind of like, and I'm sounding so shallow, and I probably am, but like a theme park, or just like suddenly everyone's just buzzing about this is the booth and whatever. It's been torn down, so it's all gone. And the child has only talked to Robert Blake. It came out when he died last year that she hadn't talked to him for many, she was raised by her family, someone in Bonny's family, and she called him Robert, and she met him eventually, but clearly there was no real connection there.
There was a lot, in the coverage of the time, you kind of got the impression he was kind of an asshole, really. Just like mean.
He had such a difficult life. It was that childhood actor thing in the 1930s. It's that Judy Garland thing. He was probably pumped up on drugs from a very early age. He, was in, he was out. He was, he was a great actor in his time.
Yes.
And, when you think of like Lost Highway, or is it the one?
David Lynch?
Yeah, the David Lynch movie.
Oh, was he in that?
Yeah, Lost Highway. And he has one of the scariest scenes I ever put to movies.
I've never seen it. I have something to look forward
to. He steps and he says, "I'm there." He's talking about the murder, and he says, "I'm there right now." He's like teleporting. You don't remember this? Oh God, it's so freaky and it's terrifying.
All right, that's the murder of Bonny Lee Bakley. So, James, number 6.
Number 6.
Dust off that book, James. Dust off that book.
Dust off that book. And this is a good one too. This is a book and a TV miniseries that we'll talk about afterwards. This is a society scandal from Anne Bang Bang Woodward. Okay, they called her Bang Bang. She we've got to go back a generation and talk about Elsie Woodward. Elsie Woodward is the queen of high society. She's the empress of old money, New York, Long Island. She is snooty, and blue-blooded, right? She's married to William Woodward Sr., and William Woodward Sr. is a playboy, and he has a string of mistresses. And one of his mistresses is this brassy hussy named Anne Eden. She's a showgirl. She's one of those showgirls. She's just really awful, and she's very vulgar. And
like Madonna in that movie.
What?
Like Madonna in that one movie?
Yes. She's definitely Madonna was doing her in Who's That Girl? So Elsie Woodward does not like her husband, and she says, get rid of her now. She's an embarrassment. He doesn't want to get rid of her, so he decides to pawn her off on his son, his 19-year-old son, who is a virgin, and he says, I'm not going to get rid of you. You go be with my son, and that way I can still keep you around. She's like, all right, okay, honey, sure thing. And so the son is smitten with her and marries her, which is a huge society. Like, everyone is just aghast that this tacky, horrible showgirl has infiltrated their ranks. His 3 snooty sisters are appalled. One time she wears red shoes with a blue dress to a gala, and that is it. Society is just get rid of this woman. She's terrible. Everyone hates her, but they all put up with her because she is now a Woodward. And the Woodwards are at the pinnacle of society. Well, the marriage is not that good, and they're always arguing, and they're very boozy, and they get drunk at parties and yell at each other and throw things at each other, and society is just aghast at this couple. Well, one night they're at a party in Long Island. They're yelling at each other and screaming at each other, and she keeps talking about a burglar that is on the loose in this Long Island city, and he's breaking into all these mansions, and she's terrified that he's going to break into. Someone saw footsteps by the footprints by the stables. Someone there was a broken window, and she just keeps talking about it and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it like she's setting up an alibi. Okay, because that night they go home, and in the middle of the night, she says she hears a crash. She grabs her shotgun, her rifle, and she goes and she shoots who she thinks is the burglar. It's her husband. She kills her husband in cold blood, is what they say. Now, what happens is that Elsie Woodward decides that she does not want a scandal. She does not want this on the front page of all the newspapers, because she is of the old school in which a woman is, when you were born, when you were married, and when you die. Those are the only 3 times you can be in print. Anything else is vulgar. So she decides to pull rank and say that she believes Anne didn't do it, that it was an accident. And she instructs the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, who were at the party, to say that. She instructs everybody at the party to say that they believe Anne Woodward did not do it. So Anne gets off, and the family says, we are standing by you because this is high society and we do not want a scandal. We will never speak to you again. But 4 times a year, we're going to trot you out and stand with, and you're going to come to dinner with us, and we will take pictures together. And then the rest of the time you are off in Europe. We will give you money, but you do not ever speak to the press. But like I said, 4 times a year, you will be photographed with us. And that is the deal from now until the end of time. Well, Truman Capote hears that. Okay. And Truman Capote is obsessed with Elsie Woodward because, he's such a social climber. And so he decides in his book, Answered Prayers, that he's going to tell the story of they call her Annie Get Your Gun is what they whisper her nickname is. He's going to tell the story of Annie Get Your Gun. And when Anne hears about this, she calls him a vicious little faggot to his face. And he says, okay, bang, bang. And that's where that one starts coming. So when Answered Prayers comes out in the story in which you learn that she had another husband, that she never divorced, all the scandal starts coming out. Elsie is furious with Truman for this. Anne goes to the hairdresser, gets her hair done, buys a new gown, puts her makeup on, and takes a cyanide tablet and kills herself the day before Answered Prayer comes out. Well, so the only time that Elsie ever acknowledges Anne ever again, she says publicly, she said, she killed my son, Truman Capote killed her, and that is the end of that. We never speak of it again. Well, now Dominick Dunne then goes off and writes The Two Mrs. Grenvilles. I don't know if you remember this book that came out in the 80s about this. And Elsie is furious about that. But Elsie is played by Claudette Colbert. And yes. Anne is played by Anne Margaret.
Yes!
Perfect casting. It's so good. It's so good. It's a mini series. It is absolutely delightful. And that is the Hollywood connection to this Hollywood scandal that I was just telling you.
Can I just say that is a flawless oration and telling of a story. I mean, I feel I should just stop. Bow down.
Let's just put that in a loop. Put that in a loop.
It really, I mean, it too soon. It ended too soon. And of course, Answered Prayers, right, was the end of Truman Capote's career. It destroyed him.
Well, that's my third one. We're going to talk about Truman in just a moment, because the story just goes on and on and on.
All right. Well, then we'll move on to number 5 as a little interlude, a little intermission, a little palate cleanser. Although I'm not sure palate cleanser is quite right.
Number 5.
William Haynes. Born in 1900, gorgeous, handsome. Actually, I think in 1929, like the number 1 male box office star of all. Yeah. And then it all came to an abrupt, screeching end. And what was the scandal? Well, the scandal itself wasn't particularly dramatic. He was in Pershing Square, as one might be, downtown, big cruising ground, and was caught hooking up with a sailor. That's right.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was arrested, and the story goes that Louis B. Mayer, under whom William Haynes was under contract to Louis B. Mayer, said, "Get married." And William Haynes, his whole persona in movies was as a wisecracker. William Haynes supposedly answered, "I am married." And of course, William Haynes was married to the love of his life, Jimmy Shields. Even though he was trysting with someone in the park, that's, I'm good.
Who cares?
Exactly. No judgment here. And as a result, Louis B. Mayer immediately fired him. And that was the end of William Haynes's career as an actor and as a box office star. Of course, this was like 1933. And I believe the very next year, the Hays Code came into effect, which saw an entire sea change in terms of what Hollywood movies could be about. An attempt to, funny enough, it's sort of very similar to the sort of Christian right today, forever going on these sort of moralizing crusades, but it had a big impact on the movies. And so in a way, if William Haynes's career wasn't over then, it probably would have been over subsequently because he was in some pretty outre movies like Way Out West, which was a sort of gay cowboy frolic in which he was mincing around and said that he was the wildest pansy you ever picked.
It's like Lonesome Cowboy before Lonesome Cowboy.
It absolutely was. In fact, I think Lonesome Cowboys was sort of inspired by
I believe that. Yeah,
Way Out West. Anywho, it was a blessing in that William Haynes reinvented himself as interior designer to the stars. In particular, of course, Joan Crawford.
Oh, Joan had been his friend throughout the 1920s. He had sort of taken her under his wing when she first started out. Called her Cranberry, I believe, was his nickname for her.
That's absolutely right. And he was kind of like a finishing school for her. He kind of taught her about elegance and etiquette and chic and sort of, that sort of behind every man is a great woman. I think in this particular case, behind this woman was a great man. William Haynes.
Yeah. And to her credit, I mean, Joan really did stand by her friend and was one of the best friends a person could have.
She absolutely did. She said that that William Haynes and Jimmy had the happiest marriage in all of Hollywood. So just goes to show, I guess, that, scandals can be a good thing, I guess.
And Joan is infamous and rumored to have swung both ways. Had a ferocious sexual appetite. Like they had fun back then. We've always been here. We just had to sort of hide in different ways.
Yeah, but it does sound as if that pre-code Hollywood was something else altogether. All right, with that, we'll take one more break. Get your Drag Race fix from all around the world and so much more content on our streaming app, Wow Presents Plus. You can sign up at wowpresentsplus.com. It's only $4.99 a month, less than the price of a latte, but so much more. All right, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, continue our countdown of the juiciest Hollywood scandals of all time.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. It's Fenton here with Tom and James. And Blake, we're counting down the top 10 scandals of Hollywood that made us go, wow. We reached number 4.
Number 4.
My one name drop thing I forgot to say about the OJ Simpson thing was I was dating a guy, some knows this, I was dating a guy at the time who was very close to Elizabeth Taylor. He was like, his husband had been her personal assistant, and he sort of swept in and helped with her like White Diamonds commercial. He was a very nice guy, producer. And one summer, the summer of, I guess, 95 of the trial, we would go up occasionally. I went maybe 3 or 4 times. I'm probably adding one to have brunch at Elizabeth Taylor's house. And she would have like hamburgers and hot dogs. It was delicious. Backyard, very familiar, warm. And it would be like hot dogs and hamburgers in chafing dishes. Everything was, it was nice. And she always had, it was mostly just for family, but she'd always have like somebody with a lot of money there. And she'd be seducing them to give money to her AIDS foundation. God bless her. You know what I'm saying? So she would like introduce, and I saw her Oscar, saw her paintings, heard her stories. She was very gracious. And then one afternoon, we're there a little bit late, and Dominick Dunne shows up.
Well, he's a common thread in this episode.
And that's what we want to say, because he was, as we remember, sitting next to the Browns at the trial. He was there every day at the trial of the OJ Simpson, the trial. And his job on Sunday, because I think on Saturday he did press, and on Sunday he went from home to home to home. He had just come from Nancy Reagan's home.
Well, yeah, I was going to say he was writing for Vanity Fair. He was doing a monthly, I think, about the trial for Vanity Fair, and he would go and talk. And Nancy Reagan would have him for lunch every week, and Elizabeth Taylor, and But he
was on his tour, and he was going from house to house, and he was sitting there one time, and he was just exhausted. I said, "What do you do to relax?" He goes, "I don't relax." And the only other thing that I felt so out of place there, but he was at one point, he goes, "What do you think Sharon Stone's going to be doing in 20 years or something?" And I said, "Lifetime movies." And that gave him a chuckle at the time. This is in the mid-90s. I don't know if it was kind. I just got a chuckle.
It's off point, I know, but I met Dominick Dunne once, and it was the most terrifying experience. It was 1988, and we were making pretty much the first documentary ever made about Michael Milken and Wall Street. And we all thought it was a really good idea to interview Dominick Dunne to talk about the money and wealth and the roaring 80s and what have you. We went to he said yes. And we went to his apartment, which was a penthouse in Midtown somewhere. And he answered the door. And it was like, he was slightly terrifying, actually. You know,
He was
a little bit grumpy and crotchety. And
absolutely.
And of course, he made also a bit of a name for himself. I mean, he's already famous, but covering the Menendez trial
and the scandal that created all of that was that his daughter was stalked and brutally murdered in Hollywood by a chef at Ma Maison, which is a restaurant we have to do our show up at restaurants, Ma Maison. And that's, again, we all know that, but a lot of people don't know that Dominick Dunne became the preeminent kind of reporter of scandal because of his own.
But also, he covered society scandals, and he covered high society, and he sort of thought of himself as like a Samuel Pepys. Yeah,
it was. I mean, we should do a whole Dominick Dunne episode. That's an evergreen episode.
Another good one. Yeah. And once again, someone who was married, had a wife, but was at the heart of it a beautiful gay man. So or a grumpy gay man in that case.
Grumpy gay man, yes, very grumpy gay man. All right, so moving on. Let's go to number 3, James.
Number 3.
Number 3, I want to revisit the Truman Capote answered prayer scandal because it's absolutely delicious. Truman Capote in the 1960s, after he wrote In Cold Blood, his massive success, true crime story, was probably the most famous author on the planet and one of the most famous people on the planet, right? And he doesn't really know where to go from there. How do you top In Cold Blood? What do you do how do you ever capture that success again? And he has writer's block for a long time. And then he decides that he's going to write this fictionalized version of the scandals that he's been told by his high society friends all these years. He's going to do a Ramona Clef about them, and he's going to tell all the sordid, juicy, scandalous tales, and he decides that this is going to be his greatest triumph ever. And so he writes the first 3 chapters of this book that he calls Answered Prayers, and he decides to, in Esquire magazine, he's going to serialize it. They're going to publish 3 excerpts, August, September, and October. Well, his high society friends are not happy with this. They are furious with him that they have all these years taken him under their wing. They have taken him on vacations. They've paid for his, apartments and this and that. And he is betraying them. And his society swans, the beautiful society women, Morella Agnelli, CZ Guest, Slim Keith, Babe Paley, they drop him like a hot potato. Everybody drops him like a hot potato. Well, the articles come out, and the first one is this vulgar story about William S. Paley and how he's fucking some woman and she's on her period and there's blood all over the sheets, and Babe Paley comes home and Babe is just, how dare, this is so just beneath you, this is vulgar, this is horrible, this is scandalous. Well, not only did he get dropped because of it, but the writing was also terrible. It wasn't that good. It was just rotten. Everything about it, he'd just been drinking and boozing, and he'd really lost his ability to write. And so then from this point on, the rest of his life, he never really writes again. Warhol hires him for some interview magazine stuff. But it's not that good.
There's some Merv Griffin interviews with him during this period where he's always talking about the thing he's working on. He's always kind of bluffing that he has something in the works.
Yes, for 10 years, he talks about how he's still writing this book and it's going to change the world. It's going to be the best thing ever. But he never finishes it. He never gets past the first 3 chapters. He just ends up at Studio 54, surrounded by, fame lickers who, nightclub people can't discern between fame and infamy, and they're the only people left on the planet who will have anything to do with them. That Warhol crowd, they're
Warhol adored him. I mean,
well,
Warhol worshipped him and stalked him when he came to New York. And
but that was before that. I mean, that was when he was still on the rise, and then when he's on the downswing, Andy's like, yeah, you know, Andy was the worst judge of character. Let's just be real. Anyone who could hang out with Andy, and so all he does is he's doing cocaine and sucking off boys in the balcony at Studio 54. The only people who stand by him is Johnny Carson's ex-wife Joanna Carson. Yes,
That's
she
right.
stood by him. She gave him a place to live, and then CZ Guest, Cornelia's mother, to her credit, never really dropped him either.
Did he ever do a mea culpa? Did he ever talk about the
Not really. No, his end days, he's kept.
I feel like it's the downward trajectory of an alcoholic. I hate to be so banal about it, but he had all this talent and promise and incredible accomplishments, and then you just start to destroy your relationships, destroy your reputation. You know, you lose whatever talent you had, and in the end, he was just a sad, surrounded by hangers-on. That's why I only drink House of Love mocktails. Keep my career, burgeoning here. Thank you. I have a colada right now. It's delicious.
A little bit of love in every can, and it doesn't have to be alcohol necessarily. All right, number two. Oh, it's just kind of a catch-all, I guess. I mean, Kenneth Anger, Randy and I met at film school, and our teacher in film school, Arnie Baskin, now passed on, rest his soul, used to be Kenneth Anger's cameraman. And so he'd always tell us stories about Kenneth Anger, who was a child prodigy. I mean, I think he made his first film when he was 10. And then he went to Paris and was very in with avant-garde cinema, Kenneth Anger. And he was an unapologetic homosexual at a time when you couldn't be such a thing. Oh, and he was also a very happy, fun-loving Satanist as well. So he was like, and he was an avant-garde filmmaker. And so,
Lucifer Rising was one of his great films, and Scorpio Rising, which is about the leather community, gay porn.
Great filmmaker, but also famous for writing a book called Hollywood Babylon, which was a compendium of scandals, of Hollywood scandals. It came out in 1959 in France, and then I think it took some years, came out in 1965 in the US, and was banned within 2 weeks. I am naive and I am gullible, I guess. I had no idea that a lot of the stories in Hollywood Babylon are not apparently true. I thought
he does. But the great thing about Hollywood Babylon, though, is he brings up these old scandals, the Johnny Stompanato, Lana Turner thing.
Right.
He does. He talks. There's pictures of like Marlon Brando's penis. There's all sorts of stuff about James Dean being gay. All the innuendo that people have been whispering about forever and ever is there, whether it's true or not.
He brought the receipts.
I mean, my favorite is that Jane Mansfield was killed in a car accident, and his story was that she had been decapitated. And the picture he published in support of that was a photo of a sort of pile of blonde hair lying in the road at the accident scene. And it turns out that the hair was actually one of her wigs that had been ejected from the car at the time of the impact. There's a couple of other things in the book, though, that, like for Rudolph Valentino, supposedly gay. I think that was true. Yeah. I mean, his first wife, Jean Acker, was a lesbian. And his second wife, Natasha Rambova, even though it's said that there's little evidence that she was gay, Natasha Rambova was lovers with Ali Nazimova.
I was going to say she was Nazimova. Yes, they ran the Garden of Allah together.
Exactly. I tell you, this pre-code Hollywood, it was a place to be gay, but I think especially a place to be a lesbian. They were running the town. They were making movies. They were directing movies. They were acting movies. They were just on it. I mean, what else is in this book?
Who runs the world? Lesbians.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and then the other story I love is that silent screen star Ramon Navarro.
Oh, God, he was the most handsome man on the planet. Jesus Christ. He was the one fucked with the lead dildo, yes.
Yes, supposedly found with a sex toy modeled after Valentino's own anatomy. and gifted to Navarro by the actor himself, shoved in his mouth, right?
Well, the thing is that he had hired these two hustlers to come to the house, and they were brothers, I think. I can't remember. They were pretty hot though, and apparently during sex gone wrong, he got fucked with the lead dildo and then shoved it down his mouth. Now they say that that's not quite true. That he did die at the hands of the hustlers, and the hustlers were still around. They just got out of prison about like 10 years ago, and then they went back in for drugs. But those hustlers were, because this was in the 60s, and they were out.
Those hustlers are still alive?
The last one just passed away, I think, in 2019.
I think we talked about that story and the Fatty Arbuckle story on that T.S. Madison episode.
Oh, poor T.S. Madison. Traumatized.
Poor T.S. Madison. Oh my God.
And the other thing I didn't know is that, he tells a story about the code and Mae West getting in trouble with the censors, and the line, "Is that a gun in your pocket? Are you just glad to see me?" supposedly uttered in the movie Belle of the 90s. She didn't apparently actually say it until 1978, long after the book was published. Did you know that?
Oh, that sounds like Mae. Mae will capitalize on anything. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting. But there's a Hollywood Babylon 2 that came out in the 70s, and that one's really fun too. I don't think it's Kenneth Anger, but it's in that same sort of vein of salacious.
It's got
Hollywood.
that awful picture of Elizabeth Taylor, who's very overweight,
coming out of the
limo,
limousine where she's so fat that Joan Rivers made fun of for so many years.
He did actually write the sequel, James, and before he died, said he was going to write Hollywood Babylon 3, but that never came.
James, it's waiting for you. Hollywood Babylon 3
Anger actually came by the gallery a number of times when we had the gallery, and he was a grump, but once you got him talking, he was just absolutely fascinating.
Kenneth Anger and Dominick Dunne. That would be a good pairing.
There you go.
All right. We'll take one more break, and then when we come back with the number one Hollywood scandal that makes us go wow. And just to say this, it's important. Drag performers and the LGBTQ plus community are facing threats across the country. And that's why World of Wonder, RuPaul's Drag Race, and MTV are proud to be partners in the Drag Defense Fund. You can support the ACLU's work for the protection of LGBTQ plus rights, aclu.org/drag defense. All right. One more break right after this.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. Vincent here with Tom and James and Blake. We've been counting down the top 10 Hollywood scandals that make us go wow. We reached number one.
Number one.
I think it has to be the Sharon Tate murder. And there's obviously millions of stories and movies. Most recently, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where Quentin Tarantino did the Quentin Tarantino thing, where he had it so that Sharon Tate is not killed by the Manson people, but people fight back and win. But I just, the context of it, because I watched, it's the end. I watched the Doris Day on Turner Classic Movies, and her son was very tied up in it. I also saw a documentary about Laurel Canyon in the 60s and the freedom and how people's doors were open.
Too, yeah.
And Joni Mitchell and everything. And they say that the 60s stopped, that the optimism and the free will and the free love kind of stopped at the Manson murders, because it put such a chill through the town, because the original victims, he went to Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski's house, but it was probably to find Michael Melcher, who is Doris Day's son, who produced the Turtles, who had somehow had interactions, as a lot of people had, Dennis Wilson with the Beach Boys, with Manson and whatnot, and that he was out. They all thought they were coming to kill Hollywood. Michael Melcher, Candice Bergen, Doris Day.
It went from the summer of love to the summer of hate, and the summer of hate that was the year of Altamont too, and everything. That was the end of the optimism and the beauty and the joy of the 60s.
Yes.
And they also have like the Sharon Tate. You were talking about the booth at Vito's or whatever. They have the Sharon Tate booth at El Coyote, the last place she ate.
She died before she was at El Coyote, and then they went home and.
August 8th, 1969, the end of the 60s.
Yeah, and Turner Classic Movie has a number of Sharon Tate movies. Of course, Valley of the Dolls. She's so good in that. She's so good in what is the Fearless Vampire Killers, the Roman Polanski movie. If you get a chance, she had an unearthly beauty that just it transcends all time. I mean, just one look at her and your heart stops.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wow Report on Radio and SiriusXM. Previous episodes on our YouTube channel, Wow Presents, and same time, same place next week. Until then, go out and do something that makes the world go
wow.